good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be watching us. This is your program, King Point Podcast. With me today is Uncle Lamin Jedabo, a lawyer and, of course, a politician. We are honored to have him back again on this platform. This is going to be our second encounter. And on that note, we are not going to dwell more on introduction part. We're just going to allow him to say hi to our followers. Uncle Lamin, good to be back.
Nah,
Yep.
Alhamdulillah, yes. I'm happy to be back uh, on the platform. So, Ting Point podcast. Okay. So, we're waiting.
Yes, we are
Yeah.
deeply honored to host you this time around. And of course, I think today we will do the greater part of this conversation in English, since you have had series of interview with Mandinka, so that others who can also
Yes.
speak
Yeah.
Mandinka definitely benefit from this session today. So just to start with,
No problem. No problem.
yeah,
Yeah.
just to start the conversation, um, we are going to start the discussion on the issue of the. Are you there?
Yes. I'm turning the light up on.
Okay, yeah, that
Yeah.
yeah, at least it will be clear.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, so I was saying that just to start the conversation, I would love us to start with the recent happening. We have seen on social media that the police are trying to call you for questioning. We are curious to ask you this question. Have you ever been called since yesterday to now? And why do you think, such narrative has been on social media?
Mm. Yes, that's right. That's right. Uh, yes, on Tuesday, I was attending a lawyers' conference at the Sadauda Kairaba Jawara International Conference Center,
Mhm.
and I saw Honorable Mai Fati, and he said that my post judgment uh, uh, interview with the media, you know, was something that they were not happy with. So he said that they will call me in to ask me questions. So obviously, I know that wouldn't be him. So if he said that, it must be the police. But then yesterday, uh, Fatih Toure also said that his sources in government uh, intimated to her that they would call me for questioning. I told her they'll be wasting their time. I'm not going for questioning. I'll not answer any questions as far as talking to the police is concerned. And, you know, I'll not go to the police headquarters on an invitation. If they wish, they can come and arrest me. But I'll not go there on an invitation. So, yeah. So that is the situation.
Yeah, I believe that is clear enough. So I would just wanted to take you back a bit with regards to the issue of, the subject matter, the discussions. As a defense counsel
Hmm.
or defense lawyer, you did a case that definitely a lot might not be able to have courage to take on. But walk us through your first encounter with this whole issue. When were you called, and at the initial stage, what did you come to your table? How did Hussein's family approach you? Take us through the beginning of the whole story.
Well, Usaina's family approached me from overseas. Uh, there's uh, there's uh, there's an arm of the family that is based in the United States, and they approached me about the matter and asked if I would want to assist, even though there was this option to go to legal aid. they were not very happy with legal aid, so they wanted me to represent Hussein. So I said, okay, if they don't have faith in legal aid, then obviously I'm happy to represent Hussein. So that was how I came into the case. Then a few days later, when we knew that Hussein was detained at the anti-crime at Banjulunding, I went to Banjulunding to visit Hussein. And, as usual with the police, it was not an easy situation. There were blockades everywhere. Nobody was willing to come up with information. Then I had to approach some higher ups who intervened and ensured that I got access to Zainu. They told me he was at the airport police station. So I went to the airport police station and I saw him there. So that was the beginning of my encounter with Hussein.
Incredible. So walk us through, because the responsibility you have taken is to shape somebody's future. If Hussein found one thing, or if Hussein didn't have a credible lawyer like Lamin Jeddah, as the way Melvin put it in our last discussion, he said he wondered if Hussein didn't have somebody of you, who is a seasoned lawyer, he couldn't imagine how Hussein's life will actually be ended. So walk us through, when you get to the airport, what was the atmosphere? Were you welcomed? And what condition did you find Hussein in?
Well, Hussein, there's a small cell there, maybe for one or two people. If you want to crowd it, you can put three people there. But obviously, it's a very small cell. So that was where he was detained. Uh, so they were kind enough to let me have some privacy with him in one of the offices there, at the police station. So we did, we talked, asked him what the situation was, what he knew about, the allegations against him and all of that. And, he said it was not him. He doesn't know anything about uh, the allegation as far as shooting the police officers and killing two of them and seriously injuring one, killing two of them and seriously injuring a third one. But he said he had no hand in it. And my own instinctive position at that time was that it couldn't be him. I didn't believe I was looking at a murderer. So, but you suspend judgment and then go ahead with investigating the background as I understood it at the time. And at the end of the day, I was convinced that I don't know who did it, but it was not Hussein. So yeah, when the trial commences, then we went with the trial and what the prosecution presented to the court against Hussein and Amiboja, but essentially about Hussein because he was a central person in this whole drama about the killings at the Sokoto Jaban traffic light. So, yeah, that was the situation. I didn't believe he did it, but we had to suspend judgment.
Exactly, and that was incredible. So, Uncle, I'm curious to ask you these questions. A lot of people have been saying that such matters are very expensive to defend. We wanted to know the matter of compensation, because we have heard from the principal witness making audio, even though we will get into the witnesses' testimonies and whatnot. But from the audios, we have heard that you have been paid by UDP or any other individual to take on this matter. Were you really paid? Did you get that question? Hello? Yeah, I believe the network is trying to misbehave. Can you hear me?
Sorry, I was what by UDP to take on the matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, I mean the payment.
No, I didn't.
I'm talking about the payment.
Hello, I didn't get that question. Yeah, about the you said some. Oh no
Yeah.
no no no! I wasn't paid. I wasn't paid anything. Uh, I wasn't paid anything. I believe you saw the family home from pictures on Wednesday. Obviously, one family, two accused persons. If I was going to charge them on the going rates for that, such a highly controversial case, the minimum would be $1 million is minimum. But I didn't pay. I know what was at stake was the public life of the country and how we want to order that public life. So if you put money in front of things, maybe Usainu would not be able to pay. They will still be able to get a lawyer, maybe for free, uh, but they'll be in no position. They'll be in no position to get the lawyer of their choice. So we took the monetary aspect out of the equation. I did not accept any payment. I did not ask them to pay me anything. They did not pay me anything. So yeah.
Yeah.
So it
And
was
then
a performance.
that's
Yes.
public knowledge, by the way. Yeah, a lot of people have healed you for that. So, and
Mm,
Honorable, I want us to get into the substantial matters of today's discussion. And to start with,
mm.
I would love to, seek your perception on the issues of the witnesses' credibility. I mean, a major part of this case revolved around testimonies given by witnesses or proposed eyewitnesses, and the public has raised a concern about their credibility. During the cross-examination, what stood out to you about the witness's credibility? Yeah, I believe it's the network down there. I'm really sorry for the breakdowns. Yeah, did you get my question?
Hello?
Yeah, it's the network. I don't know whether you have gotten my question. I was I was asking about
No, I
the.
didn't.
Okay, I said I want
You
us
said
to
the
get into the.
public.
I said I want to get you. I want
Yeah.
to seek your opinion with regards to the credibility of the witnesses, because the major part of this case revolved around the credibility of the witnesses and the testimony that they have given before the court. And the public has raised
Yeah.
concern about their credibility and their reliability. During the cross-examination of these witnesses, what stood out for you?
Well, there were the first three witnesses were the first two witnesses were the military personnel, that is Ismail Abojang and Bakari Waijaju, who said they were present at the time of the incident. Uh, but the testimony they delivered to the court was not compelling. There were a lot of questions there. Uh, Snyder Bojan talked about, you know, three shots at the scene of the incident, and then three other shots as the person was running away, trying to escape. Uh, Bakar Wajaju talked about three such. Two further shots as the person was trying to run away from the scene. So that right there is a contradiction. We have five shots, according to one witness, in total, and six shots, according to another witness, in total. So that was a contradiction in itself. So Bakari Wajaju said, he couldn't see what the accused person was wearing, or the person who was engaged in the shooting, what he was wearing, but he could see a canvas suit, which is a lot smaller, and from a distance of 25 meters, it will be difficult to understand fully the characteristics, to recollect fully the characteristics of that canvas suit. But how did the canvas suit came into the equation? They went to Husseini's home, found a canvas suit there, and assumed it belongs to Hussein, and they injected that into their testimony because they had the physical evidence. But obviously, if you go to somebody's home, you'll find things there that belong to him. Yes. So that was not to say you did your investigations and connect the canvas to the crime. That did not happen. So, I mean, and they also said they came from the Senegambia area, from Palmarima to the traffic light, to the Sukulajaban traffic lights. It turned out that was not true. They came from Yundum, and met with the third person near the scene of the incident. So, but the telephone records said they came from Yundum. The telephone records also matched their in-court testimony when they said they went to Turkey for 1 month after the shooting incident. Now you went to Turkey. That was captured in your phone records. Your phone records also captured the fact that you didn't come from the traffic light. Sorry, from Senegambia. You came from Yundum. So why would you say you came from Yundum when in fact, sorry, you came from Senegambia, Palmarima, when in fact you came from Yundum? That was a big contradiction. So how did that happen? How did that happen? How can you say you came from somewhere that you know very well that you didn't come from? And they also said, you and I are very far from each other, but if you look at the screen, we're very close. So assuming you and I are in one room, maybe 4 by 4, 3 by 3, 3 by 4. Why would I call you on the telephone when I'm in the same room with you? They said they were not together, that at some point they had to send somebody to go and buy food, Omares Jalo. But that was not true. According to the testimony, they were all together. So if you are together with somebody in the same room, where would the justification come from for you to call that person on the telephone to talk to him when you are just within 1 meter of each other, or 2 meters of each other, 3 meters of each other? So that was not true. So they alone can explain why they came up with testimony of that nature.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about the issue of the principal witness. That was Maba Jabi. From the audio, what we have heard, at ordinary people that we are not party to the case, we can hear Usenu talking about the issue of his white friend and how they remove his clothes from the room and stuff like that. But she kept on shouting, "You killed them! You killed them!" I mean, when that audio was brought before the court and you examined that during your cross examination with Mama, what did you take from that, from the cross
Well,
examination?
actually, what happened was Mama insisted that she didn't have that audio. She said it was lost. But if there was a confession on that audio, he'll do everything possible to ensure that the audio is made available to the court at the time when Mama was testifying. But that was not done. They could have gone, the Minister of Justice could have gone on the internet and they would have found everything there, because we got the audio and it's not ours. We got it on the internet. If we got it on the internet, how is it possible? Mama, of course, is a habitual liar. He's a fabricator. He doesn't care anything about the truth. That's the problem with her. Why did I say that? During her testimony, we knew that she had a relationship with the sister of the president. They know each other, they were friends, they do visit with each other, or she visits regularly with Korka. Korka is the president's sister, but at the beginning of the cross examination, she denied knowing Korka. She denied knowing Korka's son, who works at the GRA. She denied knowing the president. She denied having visited Mankamamkunda. But of course, cross examination is a very difficult aspect of testimony. Yeah, I mean, you can fabricate whatever you want to, but the person cross examining you can poke holes into testimony and destroy your credibility with the judge. Because here it's not the jury that decides, it is the judge that decides on issues of credibility and all of that. So Mama was not a believable witness at all. I mean, she said that she went to Jilulu from the Gambia. That was not true. She said she was in Senegal for a long period of time. That too was not true. She left the Gambia shortly before this incident. So if she went to Senegal, I couldn't verify that. But I know that, you know, she said that. And of course, she ended up in Jelulong.
Hmm.
But if you look at the overall testimony, you call her the principal witness. I would say the principal liar in the case. She witnessed nothing. Yes, Hussein found her in Jelula, but that was Hussein's bad luck. Yes, He was looking for a marabout, somebody who can pray for him, uh, in connection with the relationship with her white girlfriend. So they told her there is a Gambian here who is a marabout. So that was how she met Mama Jabi.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was how
Um.
she met Mama Jabi.
So I want to ask you about this question too. Issues of this require, substantial evidences, especially real evidences. They were able to find a gun. They were able to, talk about the issue of the taxi, and then, for the gun, there is inconsistency within their testimonies. They said he shot it 3 times, 4 times, and then the ballistic examiner said I mean, bullet came out from the gun. I can see inconsistency in that. Tell us through, why
Yeah.
is it that they don't really, bring bull to examine the weapon itself to see whether they're gonna see the fingerprint? Why is it that the prosecutors didn't present any, substantial evidence comes to material evidence for the court?
Well, there was no evidence, if, of course, you had the real killers before the court or the real killer before the court, maybe you'll have evidence to link the killer to it. That they said, the gun was found in four pieces. That was what PW4 said. PW4 was the watchman. So the Commissioner of Anti-Crime, Commissioner So, said that they found the gun in two pieces, the same gun. Yes, but they, when the gun was presented as testimony in court, sorry, as an exhibit in court, well, if you look at the gun, that gun was it never separated. There was nothing on the gun that you can say was dismantled at some point. Yes. So the whole thing was a lie as far as the gun is concerned. One person said it was in four pieces. The other one said it was in two pieces. The gun we saw was not capable of being in any piece. You cannot open that gun. So both anybody who testified about the gun, as far as it being the weapon that was used to commit this crime, that couldn't be true. It was not true. So I don't know why they were, talking so uh, miserably about the gun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are the situations that we found ourselves in. But more fundamentally, here is a gun that shows no fingerprint at all.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah. So
Yeah.
probably Usain ordered it from the factory, you know. And when he used it, I don't know why there was no fingerprint on it. The people who pick it up, you should have tested them and see whether their fingerprints would be on the gun. That is
Mhm.
PW4, the watchman, and of course PW5, Commissioner So of the Anti-Crime Unit. Yeah, but how is it possible? What was the explanation they gave? They said the gun was in water and in rain and sunshine for 10 days. That was a very ignorant statement. It was a blatant lie because if you bury a gun 10 meters deep in the ocean and you are lucky to find it 50 years later, there'll be forensic evidence on that gun about who handled it, the number of people whose fingerprints are on it, and all that stuff. So if you tell us that there was absolutely no fingerprint, no testimony, no nothing that you could extract from a forensic examination of the gun, then that would be very, very surprising.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed.
And that was what they said. They said there was nobody, so the gun was not used by anybody. Even those who tested it forensically at the level of the Ministry of Defense, they probably didn't touch it with their hands. So if they didn't touch it with their hands, there would definitely be uh, 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 a fingerprint on the gun if somebody touched that gun. And yes, somebody touched it. The shooter, whoever he was, touched the gun. The examiners touched the gun. How could you not have a fingerprint on a gun like that? Yeah.
Yeah. So I intend to keep you here for 45 minutes, and we have a couple of minutes to go. But I just wanted to, ask you this question about the issue of the taxi. From initial stage, they said the taxi was stood out there, and then they believed that that was the very taxi that the accused persons uses. How was the issue of the taxis as it came before the court?
No, because we don't have that information. We didn't have the information. When we had the information, the prosecution already stopped its testimony. We stumbled on it incidentally, and so they said, you know, that was later on. They said they took a sketch plan of the scene of the incident, and so out of nowhere, a big surprise. They were talking about a taxi around and sketch of the area. I brought it to the attention of the judge that we didn't have that material, and the prosecution was under an obligation to disclose everything it has to the defense, even things that would help the defense. You are under an obligation, a duty to provide it to the court. This is not something that the prosecution should be hiding, but the prosecution was hiding everything. It's just crazy. It was unbelievable. Yeah, they were
Yeah,
hiding everything. That issue of the taxi, we had it. Yeah, we heard about it in reports prior to the trial, but nothing about it was mentioned during the trial. Yeah, so that was a very unfair situation. It needed to be disclosed to Hussein and his lawyers so they can study it and see how they can use it to the benefit of Hussein.
yeah. So I want to ask you this before we get to the issue of the verdict. At what point during the trial, you have this feeling that we got this?
No, no, throughout, not at what point, throughout the trial, I knew that there was nothing there. I didn't know why, they were not providing any credible evidence to the court. But under the law, they needed to let us have a copy of all the material that they have. So I was never in any doubt about the fact that the state did not present any evidence and that it was looking good for
Mhm.
Hussein. They did not provide any evidence. Think about anything that they relied upon. They were not
Indeed,
able to provide evidence.
indeed. So I want to bring you to the issue of the verdict. After all the arguments, evidences, tensions, everything came down to one moment. That is the verdict. What was
Yeah.
your immediate reactions when the court delivered the judgment?
Uh, well, you know, I celebrated with the audience, but I knew from I would say an hour before the end of the reading of the judgment, because this was a little more than 6 hours. That was how long the judgment took. But the way the evidence has been analyzed and the fact that the court had no confidence in the testimonies of the prosecution witnesses, we knew the case was lost. So for us, we were just waiting for it to be declared acquitted and discharged. So when it happened, those who were in the courtroom but couldn't follow what was happening all spontaneously jubilated, about the verdict. I don't know where they know about acquitted and discharged. But of course, when that was said, there was a big celebration in the courtroom. And I said, you know, this is the only judgment, this is the only verdict that could be given in a case of this nature. Yeah.
When you came out from the courtroom, many might be thinking or expecting that you're going to be shouting about how you defend the style you use to defend the case, but it is more of your speech after the trial. It is more of giving public lecture. That's how I call it. Trying to highlight people what do we really expect in our justice system. That was a shocking moment for a lot of people, definitely. So you made mention of the issue of DPP. Walk us through, what do you really mean by allowing our own Gambian to be appointed as DPPs, and then trying to separate the office of the DPP under the Ministry of Justice? Walk us through about that.
Well, the DPP position is a constitutional position. Section 84, 85, 86 of the Constitution. If you go there, the appointment of a DPP, who is the DPP accountable to, who is his supervisor, and all of that, it's all there. So the DPP's role is about independently prosecuting people, doing it fairly, without influence from anybody. But if the same constitution says that the DPP is under the authority or works under the authority of the Attorney General, then obviously there is a big problem with that. The Attorney General is a political appointee. He is appointed by President Barrow as the Minister of Justice. So the Attorney General would want to satisfy the President, and the DPP would want to satisfy the Attorney General. And so this is not good for justice, especially a DPP who is not a Gambian. He can do all kinds of things and just pick his or her bags and go back to Nigeria, because Nigeria was the country where the DPPs traditionally come from, as far as the Gambia is concerned. So I don't think I want to believe that if you're going to oppress your
Yep. It looked like we have an issue with the network down there.
fellow citizens, they should be able to hold you to account. Yeah. You
Go
have a
ahead.
DPP you have a DPP who believes in nothing, a DPP who is not accountable to the Gambian people because he's not a Gambian. That does not recommend itself to people like myself as far as accountable justice and the rule of law is concerned. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there are younger lawyers there who are very, very good. If you are if you are a DPP, that is a position in equivalent to a judge at the High Court. Yes. So if you have Gambians that you can appoint to judgeship of the High Court, I believe, and there are many qualified Gambians now who can serve as judges. They can serve as DPP as well. So I
Yeah.
believe the DPP should be a Gambian. We can hold him accountable. We can hold her accountable if that is necessary. But somebody who starts all these malicious cases and then leaves the country, how can you hold that person accountable? You cannot hold the person
Yeah.
accountable. So we want if we are going to be oppressed, we want Gambians to oppress us, not a DPP from Nigeria. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
we cannot end this conversation without talking about the issues of the victims. When you came out from the court, one of your highlights has to do with we have lost men in uniform, and we must ensure that we find the perpetrator of this horrific action. Um, what would you do concerning about the issue of the victims?
Well, when we talk on those in those terms, we are hoping the political authority of the country would do something about it. You know, they have not found the killer. Yeah,
Mhm.
they brought us a wrong person, somebody who didn't commit the crime. So it's incumbent on them to find the person who committed these crimes or the persons who committed these crimes. So that's something that they need to do so that we are able to finally put this chapter behind us. I mean, as a society, the
Mhm.
families of Sanjay Gomez and Patija M. Jalo, you know, are not going to ever be able to forget about this. They were very young officers, you know, young and hoping there are many, many years uh, for you to participate in public life and life in general. But all that is thrown away, you know, all that is thrown away, and nobody held accountable for it. I believe they need to reinvestigate this matter, find the true perpetrators, and bring them before the courts.
After the court verdict, Hussein was subsequently released and then rearrested again. When this incident happened, I see you might have seen this on social media. A lot of people have put forward their arguments, their dissatisfaction with the actions. At that moment, what did you feel or what comes to your mind?
Uh, well, as far as I am concerned, I was entirely convinced it was not Hussein. I believe the government has a responsibility to find the killers. That is the government's mandate. And I hope,
Um,
after all the
I'm referring to the arrest by trying to contend with the court order. I mean, when Hussein was released from the Mile 2, we have seen from the video that the police rearrested him. The rearrestment of
yes,
Hussein.
yes, the police arrested him on the 31st of March. That was Tuesday of last week.
Mhm.
No, Tuesday of this week. Uh, that was a very serious contempt of the orders of the court. And who are the people directly responsible for that contempt? Of course, the IGP and the Director General of Mile 2 Central Prisons. He had no mandate, no authority to hand Usainu to the police. The police had no authority to accept Usainu because accepting Usainu was the equivalent of kidnapping him. They kidnapped Usainu and placed him. What did the Inspector General of Police do about Usainu at that time? Nothing. You know, somebody was abducted from mile 2 and given to you. You shouldn't touch that person. Yes, it was poisonous good. Poisonous in the sense that you had no authority over that person. So, in a more rule of law based country, I believe the Inspector General of Police should have accounted uh, uh, should have accounted for what he did on that Tuesday. And he could have been sent to Mile 2 himself or to some form of detention for contempt of court. Yeah. So too, the Director General of Mile 2. Yeah. They should not have touched Hussein at all. Yeah. They should release them. Yeah. And then continue with the appeal, which of course is legitimate. They had the authority to notify the court that they were appealing the matter. They met that requirement and said they were appealing the matter. So the law was allowed to take its course, and everybody was happy. But it was quite amazing, really.
Yeah.
It was quite amazing. That was a dereliction of duty. The Inspector General of Police, Director General of Mile 2 should both have been sent to that very Mile 2 for contempt because they disobeyed an order, a viable, valid, subsisting order of the High Court of the Gambia. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I want to ask you this, and probably this might be my last question for today. Concerning about the authorities, to be more precise, the president, do not really welcome the judgment of the High Court. Sorry, I mean the judgment of Justice Jete. At some degree, he still hold with the notion that Osenu is the person. Why do you think the president is still behaving from hearsay? The information he's been filled with, and what does this have to do with our justice system?
Well, the president gave a narrative uh, about what happened and how they were not happy with it and why they are appealing. So all of that is fine. But he went overboard by making statements that called into question the integrity of the High Court. Deference, DFCE, decisions of the courts. If you disagree, you can appeal. But he took too much. That would have compromised the cordial relationship between the arms of government. Just leave it to your juniors to deal with issues like that. Okay, you are not happy with that, we can understand. But there was no need to go into excessive language. And he was visibly angry as well. So that was not presidential. Yeah. You can come and say, we do not agree with this, and we will appeal. Yeah, without going into the details and castigating people and all that. So I think he went overboard in his criticism. He was not in court for a single day, so he couldn't have appreciated the nature of the evidence that was placed before the court. The state placed no credible evidence before the court. The state refused to investigate this matter, thoroughly. And so, what do they want? You take a gamble, you take somebody to court and hope that the judge would be wrong in his decision by convicting an innocent person. That didn't happen, and you went ballistic, on everybody, and got into too much political rhetoric. I don't believe that was necessary. The president went overboard. That speech was not presidential. Yeah. Leave it to your technocrats to deal with the issue, the Attorney General and his people. It is not for the president to stir the pot and confuse the situation as far as the verdict was concerned. But at the end of the day, what can he do? His matter has to go through an appeal. And if the appeal said Justice Jeter was wrong, I believe yes. But this is a very solid judgment. All the angles were covered: the factual narrative, the legal narrative, the analysis of the testimonies. Everything was top notch. I was very impressed. Yeah, I was very, very impressed by Justice Yates. He's really, really a mature judge. Yeah, he has matured on the job, and this was a brilliant, a solid, brilliant judgment. Yeah, on the person who didn't understand what was happening would say the judgment was wrong. That wasn't the case from the beginning. So I know it was a very solid, credible, and defensible judgment.
Uncle Lamin, you are not only criminal defense lawyer. Of course, you are human rights lawyer as well, and a life has been lost in this whole thing. What do you really think the executive need to do now? Don't you think they need to, shift the focus on finding the real perpetrator of this action rather than holding Ben to for this narrative being imputed in you as the head of the state, and you still believe in those narrative without any forensic evidence or any other thing?
Well, I think I would agree with you there. They should go find the killers. It's not Hussein. Yeah, it's not Hussein. That is not a credible position. Yeah, they should go find the killers. This is not a political matter. You cannot approach it from a political perspective. Grandstanding, getting angry, and saying big stuff about people not connected with the case. There's neither here nor there. Yeah, the Court of Bail is a credible, serious court. Now, three judges will have an opportunity to look at it. There are grounds of appeal and all of that. Yeah, because the Court of Appeal is constituted by three judges, unlike this High Court, which is constituted by one judge. So if they lose at the Court of Appeal, they can still apply to the Supreme Court, for that court to determine. Court of Appeal, three judges in the panel. Supreme Court, five judges in the panel. So hopefully we'll get to the truth by the end of the appellate process. But I believe the right decision was made.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
mm.
this gonna be the last question. What is next as far as this case is concerned? Where have you heading to?
Well, it's now headed to the Court of Appeal. It's an appeal. So, but I hope, even as the appeal progresses, the state would want to reinvestigate, do that together with the appeal so that you get a proper understanding of what happened, and then go and investigate the matter with a view to identifying the real perpetrators of this heinous offense against the people of the Gambia.
The ecosystem in the Gambia right now, after the judgment, we have seen you, you walk through all the way to Burfoot that very day. How was the atmosphere and how were you received?
Oh, it was quite satisfying. The people of Burfoot came out in their thousands and thousands and thousands to welcome their citizens, Husseinu and Ami, and the climate was it was quite an exciting climate, very exhilarating, and yeah, the chapter is closed. I'm convinced Husseinu will never go to mile two again. He didn't commit this offense. Yeah, so when all the appellate process is complete, the president would then have to start from square one to order his technicians to find the killers. He has to do it. It's not Hussein. Whatever he says, however he shouts and runs and all of that, I'm convinced it's not Hussein. Yeah.
Yes, Honorable, I am deeply honored to have you here once again. But I want to ask you this question. That is the issue of the dependent judgment with regards to the cases of the case of Auditor General. When is the judgment for that too?
Well, we did everything. We did our adoptions. We did our oral arguments. We submitted our final written arguments. The case is now before the Supreme Court. If the judgment is ready, we would be notified, and we'll go there to hear the court read the judgment. And we have another very important judgment pending. That is the judgment on the case of public servants who were banned from working within the public service by the Janet Commission, and those
Mhm.
recommendations accepted by the president. That too, that case was not against anybody. It was just on the principle. They brought out legislation that purports to control the constitution. That cannot be. That is inferior legislation. If you want to reinstate people back into the government, there are ways for it to be done. You cannot do it the way you want it to. You have to follow the law. The law is very clear. If you are dissatisfied with the judgment of a court, with the judgment of a commission, then you have a right to go to the Court of Appeal and appeal it. Instead of doing that, they change the legislation and want to bring them back into the public sector through that legislative amendment at the level of the state, at the level of the Attorney General's chambers. We don't believe that is the law. We don't believe that should succeed. But of course, we wouldn't know anything about it until after the Supreme Court decision. So we have two pending decisions at the Supreme Court. Yeah.
Um, your last statement for today. What do
Well,
you have to say?
whatever I do, I would say let us manage our public affairs independently, fairly, with decorum and dignity. We don't want public servants, grandstanding and insulting people, so that is of no use to anybody. And yeah, so that's what we want, a fair public system that caters to the needs of everybody, not the president's political supporters.
Thank you so much, Honorable Jedabo, for joining us this evening. Even though it's a very tight schedule, you have had series of interviews, and we thank you for honoring our invitation. We would love to have you a couple of weeks time to have a discussion around the politics because we have a couple of months to go. A lot of Gambians really really embrace you for your
Mm,
steadfastness, and people have a lot of trust and confidence in you. Let's see how
mm.
it's gonna be us, ahead of December election. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Thank you, Mr.